Kevin, these next two segments, I think you're really going to kind of be able to sink your teeth into. I think this is really in your wheelhouse. So Keith and I have been doing this thing lately called Ask Us Anything, and it actually has been getting a little bit of traction the last couple of weeks. So basically, if you have something you want to ask us, it could be anything.
I hope I know the answer.
Go to askmikeandkeith@gmail.com and ask away. So we had someone write in. This is Jaden K. And Jaden writes,
"You do such a good job at keeping these questions secret from me ahead of time."
It was in the notes.
I missed it. I got to go in.
Got to click the link, brother.
Okay,
I can't do everything for you.
It's maybe my problem.
So Jaden K says, I've been listening to you guys for a little over a year and really like the content. I've lived in a city most of my adult life, and I've never really needed a car, but recently moved to a more rural location. I know Keith is a big car guy, and you guys interview a lot of quote unquote squared away guys. I'd like to buy a vehicle that would be good in case of a bug out situation, or as you guys like to say, the zombie apocalypse. What are some of your top recommendations?
So these are really open. These are tough questions, but trying to keep the specific of the way he's asking.
Yeah.
Rural area, something that would be good.
I know what I got. I got my top. I got a few choices, but I got my top.
In a zombie apocalypse situation, without being too specific, but giving a range, some sort of inexpensive. I don't know what budget, so I'm going to stay inexpensive, but like
I mean, let's assume he's a normal dude. Like he doesn't have unimaginable funds.
But I'm a normal dude, and I not that I have unimaginable funds, but I buy $5,000 cars. I don't have to.
Here's where my brain went.
Yeah, all right, good.
My number one is a few things. Like I was a Jeep guy back in the day.
I was going to say a Jeep.
Yeah,
a Wrangler was on my list.
I got to be honest, and I drive one now. I think a pickup truck's my number one because you can get a lot of gear where you're going. And obviously, when I say that, I'm talking a full size 4-wheel drive. I should have said that.
Mileage not an issue. I mean, he didn't mention that, so I don't think that's a problem.
It's a pickup. It's a full size. I would want a crew cab because I have a family, but it's 4-wheel drive. A little lift kit on it, a little winch would be like a nice addition in my opinion. But you have the ability to put food, water, gear, firearms, ammo, people. And me, that's the number one, hands down. That's my number one. Kevin, this is really your expertise. What do you think?
So I think the first thing you got to ask is, you already mentioned it. Like, what are you hauling? Like, are you carrying extra people or carrying your family and whatnot? People have a tendency of buying a car that carries just what they need, and then they don't have an answer for when they need to carry more. Right. Like, let's say that you happen to come across, something along your path. Maybe it's a friend of yours, broken down car. You've got to get them from point A to point B, and you don't have an extra seat in that vehicle. So definitely plan on expanding capability, whether that's with a roof rack or a trailer hitch or whatever, or a trailer. The other thing you got to ask yourself is, how much do you want to blend into the population? Doesn't make any sense to stand out, and you see a lot of, pavement queens that are these off-road vehicles that don't have a scratch on them. And in an emergency, you could look and say, like, okay, that car is capable. It's been off-road. That driver knows what they're doing. Other cars, you could say, like, okay, that car's got a whole bunch of gun stickers on it. So there's probably tools in there that I might want to access if I were a criminal, that type of thing. So how much do you want to blend in? Another thing you want to ask is, what's the max range and where the hell are you going? Right. Like, this guy, I haven't heard, I didn't hear him say like where he's going, but what's the max radius that you'd have to travel? Right. In a city, if there's a local event, something, let's look at the most horrific urban event in the United States in recent history, 9/11. You could travel from New York City to Fairfield, Connecticut, where I went to school, in less than 50 miles. And you knew something was going on because people were talking about it, but you definitely didn't experience it the same way people did in downtown Manhattan. So what's the max range? A tornado, a hurricane, how big is the eye of the storm when you see it on the maps? How far do you have to travel away from it, right? If it's going to hit Miami, you might be able to get by in Panama City, Florida.
I like to look at these situations like, if you're in an area where there's something going on, I think he was joking with the zombie apocalypse thing, obviously, but let's take away the Red Dawn sort of scenario. If you're looking at something where, Hurricane Katrina, something where you're talking, there's gonna be mass devastation. Maybe your goal is to just get to a new region of the country, right? Maybe you have friends in the Northeast and, you're in Louisiana. Well, if that's the case, you might want to bring enough supplies to kind of last you. Maybe you might be tenting it for a while. You may not be able to stay in hotels, depending on situation. So, personally, I always want something with 4-wheel drive. That's a non-negotiable for me.
Or all-wheel drive.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he's got to, I think what we've talked about, he's got to, he's, the question is not specific enough for us to give a very specific recommendation. But if he, what was the gentleman's name, by the way? I'm sorry.
Jaden K.
Jaden. If you're looking for just something because you moved into a rural area, it sounds like he's not really had to have or rely on a car before. So he's just looking for something that to get him going and get him familiar with owning a car.
Yep.
So, anything in the early 2000s or even mid 90s, if you want to go back that far. I'm a 90s car guy these days. You look for something that has a high level of reliability. So those are going to be like your Toyota Tacomas, Honda Ridgelines, as much as I think they're kind of ugly, but things like that. I mean, Ford F-150s are one of the best selling trucks in America
for a reason.
And any of those American half-ton pickup trucks, they're all pretty good. They all have their issues and things like that, but any of those are good options for you.
Keith, you would mention the Jeep. I actually think it took me a while to get onto them, but I actually think the Jeep Gladiator might be a decent if you have the funds for it.
Yeah, I mean, the only problem with Jeeps is they do hold their value. I shouldn't say problem. It's an awesome. It's a
when
plus
you're the
as well.
owner of it.
When you're the owner and you want to sell it, it's a plus. But the value, they hold their value very well, so they tend to be a little pricey, even with high mileage. But I think I'll give a great website. They're not a sponsor, obviously, but Auto Tempest is a website that I like to look at. What it does is you can really narrow down some of these things to very specific makes and models, or just I want a 4-wheel drive or an all-wheel drive in 300 miles of where I live, less than $20,000 with no more than 75,000 miles on it. Right?
Well,
you can be very specific, and it will spit out cars that are for sale in that parameters that you give.
Can the three of us at least agree on the fact that a Prius is probably not the answer?
Not for this.
Definitely not. Definitely not.